Joining me today to talk about women in the workplace is Urmi Hossain. Urmi is Bengali by blood and Italian by birth. She works in the financial services industry in Canada, where she is currently residing. She's a self-published author, speaker, blogger, polyglot, and mentor. She's a holder of a CFA charter, one of the highest designations in the financial industry. Her first book is Discovering Your Identity, A Rebirth from Interracial Struggle. She's an advocate of women's empowerment and very passionate about teaching and mentoring other girls and women. She's part of the organization called Women in Leadership for the Victoria chapter in Canada as a social media lead where she spreads the message of gender equality and more women in leadership positions. Urmi, thanks for joining us on Things I've Learned.
I obviously don't have a lot of direct experience with how women can be treated differently from men in the workplace, but my wife has worked in IT for 30 years and has shared stories with me about how difficult it is getting men to listen sometimes, especially when it comes to proposing different ideas for solutions. She says it's often been related to company culture, that many places have been very respectful to women and she's felt no issues at all. Do you think if you find yourself in a place where culturally women or any group of people seem to be belittled, are there things you can do to address this, or are you often just left with only one route, and that's leaving?
Yeah, I can definitely tell you a lot of things about that because I also come from a very male-dominated industry, and it's very hard to make yourself heard. But it is up to you to make sure that you're taking those first few steps. And I can definitely give you a couple of examples of me encountering those kind of issues. And it actually started when I was looking for a job. And one of the things that I was doing is every time I was going for a job interview, I will always look on their website to see who was part of the management team, to see who were part of the board of directors. And one of the things that really came out of this was that a lot of the times, I would say at least like 3 out of 4 times, all the companies I was applying for, they were mainly run or managed by men. And I remember always feeling like I'm not sure if I want to be part of this. I feel like my concerns will not be heard. I feel like my needs won't be taken into consideration. And so it was always an issue. And I remember going to an interview and posing this question to the interviewer, being like, what do you do to basically support women? What do you do in terms of social responsibility? And the interviewer was actually very honest with me, and he told me that it's not that they're discriminating against women. It's not that they don't want to hire women. The whole issue is related to the fact that not many women apply for these jobs. And I was like surprised to hear that because like I saw myself applying for the job. I didn't see this as a hurdle, but I could see where this is coming from. And it's probably because I think a lot of companies, when they are trying to promote themselves, they don't promote things like diversity, they don't promote things like gender equality, they don't promote things like women's empowerment. And so this is something that comes across for a lot of companies. And I also felt the same way. I also like thought, okay, I don't know if I want to go forward with this application because I felt like the company was not supporting my values. But I thought of this, that if I back out from this, I will not initiate a change in the industry, like I cannot do like the other women who basically they're not part of the industry. They don't want to work for this industry just because they don't see themselves. They don't see basically women in the management team. But for me to bring a change, I have to go forward with this. So at the end, what happened is I still went forward with this interview and like that. And I did like almost get an offer, but I did decline it because I felt like the job itself was not in line. And I did appreciate the honesty of the person who was interviewing me because I was like, I need that kind of honesty, like the interviewer could have just said, oh yeah, we do like everything to Superwoman, but he was really honest and that's what I appreciated. So to basically answer the question that you said, I do think that yes, there are a lot of hurdles, especially when you work in industry that are so male dominated and which are also like so like they're by ruled and run by men. It's hard, but it's also our job to basically solve this issue by making men part of the solution. So you have to like have conversation, you have to raise awareness, you have to speak up about these things. So there are ways that you can overcome this.
That's a really interesting approach to actually asking them in the interview process. I feel like a lot of people, if you ask them, you're going to get some people like that who are probably pretty forthcoming in telling you something, maybe giving you candid information about how the company works. But I could also imagine if the company didn't care, maybe it wasn't something that was part of their values or very important to them. I could imagine that maybe they would be a little surprised by the question, maybe a little bit less than completely honest in their response, and that might actually come across pretty clearly in the way they'd respond to you. Have you ever done that before, and do you feel like that's the case?
If I have done what exactly?
So maybe you asked the question of someone else, and they responded, but maybe it was a little bit less than a genuine response, and maybe it was pretty clear that they weren't being completely genuine.
Um, it did not occur to me actually to ask this question afterwards because then luckily because I do a lot of research in every single like kind of a like before any kind of approach, I'm always doing a lot of research. So luckily, it did not occur to me where basically I had to deal with someone who's not genuine enough. And I also I have like I feel like I have a good intuition. So whenever I would like encounter or have this kind of meetings with people for interviews, I could sense it not even without asking any questions, like I could sense whether they were genuine or not in supporting basically women in general. And in an indirect way, I did have another situation where I feel like the person itself was not valuing my skills, my qualifications, where basically I went through this interview process. I did like all kinds of interviews and like all the steps. And then afterwards, it was time to basically go to the next step. I asked for the benefits because it's important for me. And I was also asking for some like to understand how much they were going to pay me. And this is when I realized that they were basically paying me much less than the industry. And I was not even given any benefits. And this is where also like I feel like the fact that I was a woman did play a big part in it because I was being told, yeah, we're gonna give you a good salary and blah blah blah. But then when it came to actually, write it down in a contract, they did not give me whatever they were planning to give me. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's exactly a way that someone can seem like they're being sincere with you, but then as soon as you see the offer, you recognize this thing that we hear time and time again, right? That maybe women are not being compensated the same way they would be
mhm.
as their male counterparts, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Okay. So, one of the things I think, and I think we're all hoping, like I have two young daughters, I think what we're hoping is that we're seeing a lot of major changes in just awareness around the way women are treated. As my daughters are about to enter the workforce, I hope we're seeing changes in the workplace. Maybe the way society as a whole is feeling about equality, et cetera. Do you feel like we've seen improvements that maybe weren't there, 20, 30 years ago? If so, what can we keep doing to keep trying to raise awareness and keep the progress going forward in the right direction?
Yeah. So I can definitely tell you how I've seen things change from when I was a kid. Um, because I do feel like women are still very much marginalized. I do feel like women are very much neglected. And it's not just in the workforce, but in just in the society, like in general. And I can also speak about this from a perspective of a South Asian woman, because a lot of the times like you spoke about like you have two young daughters, like one of the things that I always see every time I go back to my parents' country is child marriage, and unfortunately a lot of young girls are seen as a financial burden for many families, and they're given away to marriages because that's the only way that families think they can solve a problem. And they don't believe in the education of the girls. They believe that it's better to basically educate their male counterparts. And luckily, one of the things that I have, like that I'm seeing right now, is that there are organizations out there that are actually trying to basically provide mentorship program. They're trying to educate girls, trying to teach girls about independence, being self-sufficient without depending on their brother, without depending on their father, without depending on their partner. And I'm not saying that this is wrong, but I'm just saying that as a woman in general, we're not thought about being like our own. We're not thought to be complete and self-sufficient. And that's like something that I've seen. And I can see like there is a little bit of progression and an advancement in teaching girls to be that. So to go back to your question, yes, I do think there are changes, but I do think that the changes are also slow because there are, issues, like there are fundamental issues in the workplace, in the society, which we still have to tackle. But I think that with social media, for instance, I feel like a lot of women are trying to raise a lot of awareness. Like social media can be good and bad, but I think to use it as a tool to bring change, to advocate for something, I do think it is powerful because there are so many organizations, there are so many communities that are being created where women just gather together and they find a way to empower each other. I think this is beautiful. So I do think that going forward, it will just be positive. But of course, we will always face some hurdles along the way. But it is also our job as a woman to be our own best advocate.
I feel like one of the things that probably makes, the biggest difference around the world really is just education in general. It seems like that's the ticket to get, better jobs potentially, to be able to then, get a better salary, maybe some mobility, maybe some social mobility. Education seems like it could be something to help be kind of a great leveler. And it seems like it's one of those things that, we'll hear stories about, for example, Afghanistan and the horrible situation there and how, suddenly girls are not allowed to get the education that they had before the Taliban had taken over again. But I feel like for every one of those stories that we hear about progress that's being made in other nations in terms of opportunities for education that are available. Do you feel like education is the best thing that just in general will help, raise women up so that they have more possibilities?
Yeah, I do definitely think that's one of the solution, and I do think that a lot of like men do, like not men, but society in general do fear a woman who is very much well educated because they can see that, a lot of the times men feel like, okay, like women don't need us, so they feel like it's a threat. But I do think that education is a powerful tool because it really helps you to develop critical thinking skills. It helps you to develop skills. It helps you to, grow as an independent woman. So it makes you like also stronger, like mentally, psychologically. So I think it is important to have that education as a way to solve an issue. And I do definitely think that having also women in leadership roles is also very important. Like if we think about politics, I do think that like if you have a woman in politics, it's definitely gonna change a lot of things in a country because things will be done in the perspective of a woman. So for instance, like let's say if there is a book that I'm reading right now, which is called Invisible Woman, and they talk about how a lot of the times women are very much afraid of taking public transportation because there's the fear, of violence, being attacked and stuff like that. But if we have, for instance, the woman who's running the country, then maybe like she knows that this is an issue, she can actually implement something to solve that kind of issue where women actually feel safe in public transportation, for instance. So yeah, I do think like education and having more women in leadership position, having women in government, having women in politics will definitely solve a lot of issues.
That's a really great thought too, that them being in leadership roles, they're able to then kind of raise awareness and, put things in place that may help, just throughout the
Yeah.
whole society, really. That's super interesting. So, as a manager who has, women working for him, and I obviously have peers as well who are women. I don't know necessarily how they feel or what things they may be dealing with. What should a male manager or peer, or if I'm a direct report of a woman, what should I know? What should I be thinking about to be more successful in working with them? And by that, I guess what I mean is, what are the things that I need to understand or, should be aware of that I probably just have no idea is really going on for them in their situations that will help me maybe build bonds with them?
So I in the past had a lot of managers, and I always felt like it was going to be a bit harder to work with them. But honestly, like I was lucky enough that I have always worked with great people. And I think what made them great as male managers were the fact that they were like open-minded, they were welcoming to ideas, and they were flexible. And I think it's important to have that kind of mindset because men and women are not the same, and we have different needs, different priorities, we have different wants, and have being open to basically accepting the needs of your female employees are very, very important because as a woman we want to be supported. We want to be supported, we want to be heard by our male managers. So for instance, I'm going to give you a very quick example where I basically work with this woman who is a single mother, and she basically had a son. And so every time at 3 p.m., she basically had to leave to go and pick up her son. And a lot of the times, if you think about this, like usually like the hours are 9 to 5. But for instance, my manager was flexible enough to basically let her go home at 3, go pick up her son, and then she could work from home. And so this shows that you care for your employee. And I think it's important because when you as a woman, you don't see that kind of support, you don't feel like staying in a company. And this plays in the retention of the company. This plays also with the reputation of the company. This shows if the company cares for you. So being like flexible, being open-minded, and also like having conversation about these things, like as a male manager, you want to go out to your female employees and be like, is there anything that I can help you with? So let's say like as a female employee, you want to work like let's say 3 times at home or 2 times from home. I think it's also your job to raise it, to talk about this rather than shy away. Because I think we always feel like, we'll be perceived negatively, but it's better to speak up about those things rather than just keep them for yourself because then you will not feel happy in the workplace and then like a vicious cycle will start and then you'll be unhappy, you will feel like changing job and then you will start back again in another company. So it's also important that you tackle these things like at each step.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess that's, kind of what I'm thinking too, is there's probably, maybe a little discomfort on the side of a female reporting to a male. Maybe she has a difficult time expressing what she thinks because she's afraid that somehow she may be perceived as different or requiring special treatment. It's also difficult, I think, for a male to be asking the question of the female employee, like, is there something different that maybe you need that I don't understand?
Mhm.
And so, the challenge I think for me sometimes is I wonder, how can I ask that question so I don't seem like I'm treating her differently? Because I would imagine that women don't want to feel like they're viewed differently.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that because I think we're just perceived like we cannot do our job. And this is where, the whole syndrome and things like that come into play. But I think as a manager, like when you have those one conversations, like you can, like it has to come from a genuine place. Like it has to come from a place where you actually care for your employee, where you can just ask if everything is fine, if there is anything that you can help her with because it's important to have that kind of like openness between two people, which is like a relationship based on trust and communication. Because if you're not able to build that, like basically your employees will resent from it. Like they will not they will not feel like they would like to stay. They will not feel like they want to work for you. So I do think like when you have those one-to-one meetings, you can just generally bring this topic up. Like, is there anything that I can help you with? And also you as a female employee, you want to be open about this. You wanna openly talk about the things that are bothering you, because if you don't talk about these things, then they will always be there. And I do think that, there are a lot of companies, they offer like therapy session, for instance. And I think that if there are things that are bothering you, you can talk about this in a therapy session. I'm pretty sure there are like counseling strategies where you can also ask for tips on how to tackle some of these things. Like companies do offer this kind of support, so that they help you to better navigate these challenges.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. So I feel like a lot of times when, women are comfortable talking about these kinds of topics, they, are interested in it, they're passionate about trying to help and change things. A lot of times they have had a female leader that inspired them, or, either worked with someone or observed someone that they saw that they wanted to emulate. Do you have stories from your past, maybe about a female leader that you felt like either inspired you or that you wanted to be like?
Yeah, I do have a lot of female leaders that I admired, and definitely some of them were from a previous companies. And there was one manager in specific. We both shared the same educational background. Like we both were in finance. She was, of course, much older than me. She was in the industry for much longer. And even though she was not formally, let's say, like I always talk about mentors, even though she was not actually in a formal way my mentor, I always saw her as my mentor because um, without the intention, I feel like she became my mentor because I could go up to her and ask her for things like for guidance. I would ask her for advice, whether it was related, let's say, to finance, whether it was related to working, whether it was related to working in a group or working for a company. And so she has been a great role model for me because I always saw her as a very outspoken and charismatic woman. And she was also very bold. Like she was not afraid to say what was in her mind. She would always speak up. She would always stand up for herself. And I always looked look up into her because I felt like she was audacious and courageous. And then along the way in my career, I also had a lot of friends who were my mentor. Basically, it's a combination of friend and mentor. And I always like saw them also as a role model. Like I feel like you learn a lot from your female colleagues, and you learn a lot from your female leaders. And another woman that basically I very much admire is Meghan Markle because she is a big advocate of women's empowerment and gender equality. And a lot of the things that I do right now is because of her, because she supports this cause so much. She gave a speech at the United Nations where she says how we should raise women and girls to use their voice to bring a change. And I feel like it is true. And so a lot of the work that I do, it is because of her. And I try to instill that confidence in a lot of the girls and women that I mentor.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and just in general, I think a lot of times if somebody's been in that role for a while, and especially if somebody's seen maybe some of the changes that have happened over the last 20, 30 years, they may have either great stories or great wisdom or things that they would suggest us to say, this is something I wish I'd known when I was younger.
Yeah.
Did you ever have, possibly this more senior person who'd been in finance with you ever have any kind of, great feedback from them about here's something that you should absolutely be thinking about that maybe you don't realize is so important?
You know what? It's funny that you asked me that question because when I was much younger, I did not have a mentor. Like I remember like when I was 10 years old, even when I was like 15, 18, 19, I always wanted to have like that, you know, big sister, let's call it, like someone that I could go to for any kind of advice, but I never had that figure. And somehow, like I never had it. And like always felt like there was something missing. And then I was like, I want to become that mentor that a lot of people did not have. Like basically, I wanted to be the mentor that I never had. And
That's That's a great story.
yeah,
I mean, that honestly, I think is so common for people, right? They feel like they wish they had that feedback from someone. They don't get it. And then they think, well, maybe I can give that to someone else.
yeah. Because I feel like I always had that void, and I was like, you know what, I need to find a purpose in my life. And I feel like one of the things I very much wanted to do is to be the mentor that I never had. And this is also because I also think that as I became much older and as I started to have mentors, I realized the value that they were adding me. And how I was talking about mentor just before. I have this mentor of mine who basically gave me this advice, and I think this is the best advice that one person can ever give you. This was a couple of years ago. It happened when I was looking for a job. And then what happened is I got almost four job offers and I was having a hard time choosing like the job. And I was not quite sure what route to take. I liked all of them. And then what she told me, and this was the advice that she shared, was whatever decision that you always make sure that it will always bring you closer to your true self. So that was the advice that she gave me. I felt that was the best advice. And I, like, after basically thinking of what she said, I was able to finally come up with a decision. And it was very simple. Like, she told me that one particular sentence about choosing, like, whatever you do, always make sure that you're always going to bring you closer to yourself. I feel like it made it easier for me to come up with a decision. Like, she did not tell me, okay, choose A because A is better. She told me just what's best for you. So I think that's one of the best advice that I have received. And I think this is a job that a lot of mentors should do is you have to help the woman or the people that you interact with to find their path in their own way. And you just have to make sure that you're there to support them. And so she has been my greatest supporter. She has been my greatest cheerleader. So she has been like a very important person in my life.
And that's absolutely fabulous advice. I feel like when you're young and you're interviewing for a position, you have a tendency to try to say what you think someone wants to hear. And as you get older and you become more wise and you go through more and more of these experiences, you are more and more yourself because you understand that, you want to find something that's a good fit. If you say something that turns a company off and makes them not interested in you, you're very glad that you found out early and in the interview process. Uh,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, I think that is absolutely amazing advice for everybody. That's a great
Yeah.
story. Is that something then you would say, now you're trying to mentor others. Um, there's probably, that advice that you're giving people, other things that you would say that, hey, when I go and talk to someone, this is one of the first things I want to share with them so that they have that wisdom that I wish I'd known when I was starting out.
You know what? That's a good question. Like I don't know if there's one thing that I share with them in particular, but I know that as we have the conversation, one of the things that I like to tell them, and I think this comes from the fact that I am in the financial sector, is always take a risk because there is this expression in finance that says higher the risk, higher the return. And so I always tell people that I mentor, like, take the risk, try it. Life, it is a trial and error. And if you don't try, you will never know. Like, you will miss on the opportunity. So probably that's one of the things that I would say that I have said to a lot of people that I have mentor, that I still mentor. And a lot of these people that I mentor are like Gen Z, so they're in their 20s. And it did happen to me very recently that one of the girls, she was asking me a question about like wanting to study in Dubai, but she was not quite sure. And then I said, you know what, you're young, you're in your 20s, you still have like a life ahead of you. So why not just try? Try it for a semester, try it for a year. And if you don't like it, you just come back. But I think it's worth trying because then if you don't try, you will always have that question mark. You will always be like, okay, I never tried it. You will regret for not trying. So I always tell people like be a risk taker.
That's a great story. So do you know if she did it?
Yeah, she accepted it. She accepted it and she's gonna go in September.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes, and hopefully that gets her closer to what's really her, which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
just amazing advice.
Yeah.
So really appreciate you coming on and talking with us about these issues. I think these are all, very both timely types of things that we're seeing going on for people, throughout society in general. I think women are dealing with a lot of really unique problems, hopefully a lot more things that people are being aware of now that they weren't before. And hopefully we can continue this conversation and keep talking about other things that are other issues that women are dealing with.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.